Can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
My name is Sydney Ruff, and I am the Senior Director of Admissions at Landmark. I am also an alumna. I graduated here from Landmark with my associate's degree in 2006, and it was just before Landmark added the bachelor's degrees that we have now. So I transferred to Syracuse University, and then I went on to Simmons University for my master's. And I've been back with the college for just about 13 years. Actually, one of the reasons that I returned to Landmark was as I was exploring my options of where I wanted to work, my mom asked the question, when was the last time I could remember being really happy? And that was Landmark for me.
Can you tell us a bit more about Landmark College?
And we are a optimally sized school, we'll call it, with 450 students and a 7-to-1 student to faculty ratio. One of the biggest parts to a Landmark education is we are specifically designed for neurodiverse students. We were founded by Dr. Charles Drake, who opened a high school in Beverly, Massachusetts, and it was always his dream to develop a college. And over the years, we started with an associate's degree program, working really exclusively with students with dyslexia and language-based learning disabilities. And then over the years, added ADHD and of course, autism spectrum a little bit later beyond that. And right now we have 6 different bachelor's degrees, ranging from communications to psychology, computer science, biology, and liberal studies. And then we also have 5 different associate's degrees as well. The college is located in Putney, Vermont. And if you've never been to Putney, it really is one of those quintessential New England towns. I think many people are surprised that there are no stoplights, but it does really function so well as a small community. Vermont itself is such a beautiful state. We really want to show it off as much as we can, and we want to make sure that the students have the opportunity to see as much as they can as well. In addition to the there's hiking trails on our campus, and we'll sort of guide students in those hikes. We also offer other options to engage with the greater environment around us. Those events can range from, in the fall, we go apple picking, and in the winter, we can go even hiking in the winter time, which is really, I think, most people don't think about, but we do it as well in the fall. And I think it's just a wonderful way for a student who doesn't necessarily have a chance in any other way to engage with Vermont as a way to sort of see it for themselves.
Could you share some of Landmark's foundational principles?
So when Landmark was founded, it was always the goal, and still remains the goal, to work with students who are neurodivergent, and we really want to destigmatize any sense that a student has around their disability as being a negative component to their learning, and that's not the way that we see it. We want a student to truly understand the way that they learn, and that starts from day one here at Landmark. It's so important that a student understands both their strengths as well as their challenges, and we want them to use them at the same time. So if a student is challenged in an area, we want them to very naturally be able to go into a strength and utilize that piece and leverage it so that it really does become very kind of smooth as the experience would be for the student. As part of my story, I think it's so important that people understand that we can always be told the way that we learn growing up, but it truly doesn't sit in until you really have a chance to research that diagnosis. You're in an environment that's surrounded by other students that are also being asked to do that similar research. But now we're in an environment where people are wanting to work with us, not just because of those differences, but they're also seeing us for all of the strengths that we bring to the table as well. And it's truly an incredible experience to really be in this place that is embracing every element of the student. And I really enjoyed the opportunity, and I know other students do as well, when you get to be the one that's controlling your identifiers. I think in school we had to rely on the identifier of learning disability or whatever our diagnosis was, because that was such an important element to our success in an academic setting. But to come to a place where it's all about learning, but then it's all about also understanding who you are. And when you get to be the person that's in control of those identifiers, so many other opportunities come up as well. And I think that's one of the big components to what we're trying to do here, whether that's through our on-campus environment or even some of our newer programs that are online, and even in our summer programs. We want to make certain that a student always feels heard and has the option to really embrace who they are, both in and outside the classroom.
What does the admissions process at Landmark entail?
So Landmark College admissions process is really similar to most other colleges. You'll still see, the application, which a student can go through the Common App, or they can go through Landmark's direct application. And they'll be asked to submit mostly things that they'll be submitting at other schools. So the personal statement, the letters of recommendation, the transcripts. And then we also do an interview. But in addition to those pieces that are often very common, students can submit their SAT or ACT scores if they feel like that certainly represents an area that they want us to know about as part of their application. And that could be both for, the positive of, look how great I did on my SATs, or it could also say, like, this is an area that I'm still struggling with. Here's how I did on my SATs. And then the other part that is a little different than most schools is that we're asking for a psychoeducational report. And this report can sometimes be a part of the IEP, so the individual education plan for the student at the school, but it's not always included in that piece. But what we're really looking for is a cognitive evaluation, a reading achievement evaluation, and then an official diagnosis that it falls under the category of learning differences. And what the admissions team will do is review all of those documents, including, getting to know the student a little bit as well. And then we also do a lot of work with the school to ensure that we're getting the best picture of what the student is currently doing and what type of supports they're really looking for. And that helps us to really identify the best candidate for Landmark. I think most are surprised to know that our acceptance rate is right around 50%. Not every student that has a learning difference is going to be the best candidate for Landmark. We don't want this to be another reason for why a student struggles. So we want to be as clear as possible around what we can support the student in. And if there's areas that we can't, we want to make sure that we're identifying that with the student and often the family as a part of the process as well.
How does Landmark's approach differ from more traditional colleges with autism support programs?
One of the major differences between Landmark's program and any other college is our approach and very much a team environment when we're working with the students. One thing that I think is important for people to remember is even though Landmark has a lot of support, it's not there to be, an unrealistic environment. I think one of the fears that I had as a student was, if Landmark is so supportive and no place else can match that support, how much are we really preparing the student for the future? And that was really not the best way to interpret what Landmark is doing. All of our supports are integrated into what we do to give a student an opportunity in experimenting with what works for their own learning style. So when they're in some of their foundation courses at Landmark, they're really being asked to dive into the way that they learn and figuring out specific strategies that are designed for their own learning style. And part of that is kind of figuring out what works best. And so as part of the experience, if a student isn't a great note taker. We don't want the student to just say, well, let me have the faculty's notes on that, because it's not really teaching the student very much in the process. So we might use that as an option for a student to use in the future, but we also want to be teaching that student how can they better take notes in class. And so much of Landmark isn't just about the experience here, but it's really preparing a student for what to expect in the future as well. So we have some pretty, standard accommodations as well as supports that you might see at other colleges, but I think they're delivered very differently. So a student has, the moment that they step foot on campus as a part of a new student, they have their class schedule, and then the first support that they'll automatically have as a part of their schedule is their advisor. And the academic advisor's goal is to really help a student navigate, not just during their first few weeks or semester to semester, but really getting to know the student and holding them accountable in a really healthy way. Are things really going well, or do we need to kind of bring up some other options that a student can engage with that might help them further some of their challenges? Do they need to explore our Drake Center for Academic Support, which can be one-on-one, really working with a student in developing their reading or writing skills? Sometimes a student can be a little bit embarrassed about asking for that type of help, but the advisor can really be there as a support to that student, as well as the student will also be hearing some of these things as part of their first year program as well in some of their classes. We also have executive functioning support, so that's built into mostly all of the faculty and staff on campus as part of best practices. But if a student really wanted an executive functioning coach, they could have that. And that would almost be an additional person that the student would be seeing on a regular basis. We have our peers program, which is specifically designed to work with students developing their social pragmatic skills. And this is really a great option for any student that hasn't seen a lot of success in more of the traditional social group work, where we can really help a student in figuring out how to navigate new relationships or prolong, friendships to last longer, or how to better engage with, different individuals, whether that be faculty, staff, students, friends, maybe even romantic relationships as well.
Landmark works hard to involve students in their own development, right?
One of the pillars, I guess, in what you can expect from your Landmark education here is we want the student to be part of the process all the way through. So we don't want the student to feel like they're on the outside of a conversation that would help them in further developing. So that starts with this portal of information that the student can log into on any given day at any given time and find out exactly how they're doing in each of their classes. And this is also a communication effort that the college puts forth too, where instead of just sending an email to a student from a professor, that email then goes through this portal. So now whoever's working with that student also sees that same message from the faculty member. So if that message says, hey, I can see you working really hard in your English class this week, but I'd really like to see you in office hours to further develop some of these ideas, that goes through this portal. So now the student has it as their reminder that they need to go into office hours this week. But now the advisor also then has that same information. So the advisor can say, how did that appointment go this week?
What housing options are available at Landmark?
So the housing process at Landmark really starts once a student has been accepted and has deposited. They are sent a housing preference form. Most students are paired with a roommate in their first semester. That's pretty common. I think one of the things that we're really looking for is that the two students can work complementary with one another. We don't have to, find the exact same interest for every successful pairing, nor do we want to pair students that are complete opposites either. But we really want to make it so that both students feel encouraged by each other and also supported. And if they end up being best friends, then great, but that's not the goal of what we're trying to do with the placement process in housing. Of course, we offer medical accommodations where a student might not need a double, where they might just have a single room option. And those are all sort of further defined through a process as a part of the housing process. There are a few different types of housing at Landmark. There is more of the traditional residence hall where most of our first year students are placed, but then we also have housing for some older students, as well as students that might have already had a previous college experience and are looking for more options, both in the residence hall and maybe even outside of the residence hall. About 98% of our students live on campus. And I think that that's a really strong number, but I also think that that is so important for a student's success.
How does Landmark communicate with parents and families?
Landmark's approach in working with students has to incorporate the family. The family has been the student's support all the way through to get them to this point. And so we don't want to say, okay, now the student's 18, it's up to them to make their own decisions. It's more gradual than that. The way that we see it is a student has really had to rely on their family as their guide to get them to this point. And it would be unfair to everyone involved if we said, trust us, it will work. Because that's what so many of our families have heard before. Trust us, it will work. And then what happens is it doesn't work. So part of our mission in the admissions office is to help develop that trust in a new educational approach. And that takes time. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're starting to work with the student, but also incorporating the family when we can. And once a student becomes a student at Landmark and therefore deposits with us and certainly makes the decision to attend, they will have the option to sign the FERPA. And that is an important step. I think about 95% of our students sign that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to have every conversation with the family. It just allows for a few different scenarios, and I think that this is a really nice way where we provide a little bit of a transition away from what I would consider to be almost like crisis mindset, sort of stepping in as early as possible to help counter correct whatever the action is taken. We want to see a student start to engage with us. And sometimes they're going to see direct success from those attempts. And sometimes they might fall a little bit, and that might be more of a challenge. And we want to see that. We want to see those ups and downs. And so we don't want the student to feel like they can't make a mistake with us. So sometimes, especially in the first couple of weeks of the fall semester or even our spring semester, our families get those phone calls from their kids, and they can just hear from the hello that something is wrong. We don't want the family to have to get into their car or get onto a flight and fly here just to determine what the issue is. So the families, so long as the student has signed that FERPA, they'll have access to the student's advisor, the resident dean, pretty much anyone who's working with the student. And that way, if they do get one of those calls, they can reach out to those individuals first. And then we can kind of best determine whatever the challenge is, and we'll come up with a solution.
How does Landmark College measure success?
Some of the other components of Landmark, I just want to, highlight some areas that I think are really important for anyone who's considering us to know is when there are so many different ways that a student can engage with Landmark. And unlike most colleges where they're really looking for that bachelor's degree completion to identify their success, Landmark doesn't judge our success that way. Certainly it can be, but we also see a student that needs us for maybe a short semester, let's call it a year, or even a semester of rigorous training, and then transferring on to their desired school of interest is certainly still a success to Landmark. So of the students that are selecting the roadway that they want to take, whether that be our transition at college option, which is really there for students almost as our version of a gap year. So they take a few less classes, but is a little bit more of a gradual approach into college, and this is a year option. If a student selects that program, or they choose for an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, or even wants to engage with some of our online degrees.
What types of career services does Landmark provide?
Landmark has also put in a lot of effort to really ensuring that the next step, regardless of what that step is after Landmark, is something that the student not only sees as a part of their future, but also is planning for that during the process here. Some of that has really been developed through our career center on campus, and they can really help a student not just finding jobs, but really helping them making sure that it's the best next step for them. And we have different work experiences that a student can engage with. And we have something called our ERE program, which allows for students to who haven't really had much work experience start working almost as like a pre-internship with different offices on campus, really getting them ready for what they would expect in a traditional internship. And then we have various different internships, both on campus and off campus. And internships are a requirement for our bachelor's degrees. Anyone seeking that bachelor's degree is required to do one. And I think that really gives students a lot of confidence in that next step, because then they can walk away saying, I not only have the degree, but I also have that work experience that makes me sure that this is where I want to go in my future, direction. And then we also have what's called an assistantship option. So these are for recent college graduates through Landmark that are also offered an opportunity to stay on campus and for 1 year only, and really develop their skills a little bit further and explore different careers as well if they wanted to do that, working with different offices. So there's a lot of different approaches that we take in getting a student really ready for that next step.
Big thanks to Sydney Ruff and Landmark College. Please subscribe to Inclusive Academia.